intentions of certain Iranian leaders towards the United States and statements that can be bellicose or hostile. However, I will just point you to what the President said about what his and our assessment is of that capacity right now. But it is, look, Iran is a very dangerous place. It's a dangerous regime, and we take specifically the refusal to abandon their nuclear ambitions very seriously.
When the President said Israel hasn't made a decision yet about attacking Iran, it should be implied that the United States has made a decision that's not going to happen in the next 3 months?
Well, I wouldn't imply anything at all except to the explicit comment the President made, which, well, two things. One, we have greater military and intelligence cooperations with Israel than we have ever had, and that what he told NBC was that he believes that Israel has not made a decision about what action to take, or whether or not to take the action that's been discussed.
As the United States.
Well, I'm not going to get into that kind of assessment. What I will say is that we believe that the course that we're pursuing with regards to Iran is the right one, that the sanctions have had significant impact on the Iranian economy. They have helped exacerbate tensions within the Iranian leadership that are now quite apparent, whereas when President Obama took office, Iran was unified and the world was not with regards to Iranian nuclear ambitions. The opposite is now true, and that has had, I think, the effect of making clear to the world that the problem here is Iranian behavior. Now, we will continue to pursue that course and press for change in behavior by the Iranian regime, even as the President has made clear on a number of occasions, we do not remove any options from the table.
Are you taking credit for that? Wait, are you taking credit for the tensions within the Iranian leadership?
I'm just saying that they contribute to.
No, I know, but are you saying that your policies have helped exacerbate the tensions?
There is no question that the impact of the isolation on Iran and the economic sanctions on Iran have caused added turmoil within Iran, and that has had an impact at a variety of levels, most demonstrably on the economy and on the currency. But again, the unity that Iran enjoyed, if you will, with regards to this issue 3 years ago has gone, and by contrast, the international community has united behind the position that the President has taken with our allies and partners to pressure Iran to try to force Iran to change its behavior.
Back to,
hold on one second. Let me go to Wendell. Can I just go to Wendell? I'm going to work my way back to you, Connie. Thanks.
To Syria and Egypt. Secretary Clinton has called for, suggested the formation of a contact group of like-minded nations to step up the pressure on Assad's regime. Have you begun preparing for that? How would it work?
Well, I would refer you to the State Department for more details. I think that we have been working very closely with a number of partners and allies, both in the region and around the world, as we have worked to put pressure on Assad, and we'll continue to do that. We're carefully considering a full range of options, and we'll work closely with our allies and others to help the people of Syria put an end to this criminal regime.
You don't want to suggest how that might be more effective than what we're doing now?
I think that we're pursuing a variety of means to put pressure on the Assad regime, to isolate it further. I mean, the fact is Assad is running out of money, and we will make sure, we will work rather to make sure that he is unable to finance his continued crackdown, and that involves coordination with our allies and partners, those who believe as we do that it's time for Assad to go, because the Syrian people deserve a transition to democracy.
And what about weapons and the ability to sell weapons to the Syrian people?
Again, we believe that a political solution is the right course here, and that opportunity remains. And that's why we need to act. And that's why we felt that the United Nations Security Council should act. But we are continuing to work with our international allies and partners who believe, as we do, that the behavior of the Assad regime is unacceptable and reprehensible.
And on the charges against NGOs in Egypt, can we assume that prosecution would cross a line?
Wendell, I don't want to, again, speculate about what actions would prompt what reactions. We are deeply concerned about the crackdown against NGOs. We're concerned about the ability of Americans who have done nothing wrong to leave the country, and we are working at every level of the Egyptian government to resolve this issue.
Does the Egyptian government know what would affect U.S. aid? Has it been made clear to them?
I think we have made clear, both in our public statements and in our private communications, how seriously we take this, and that these actions could have consequences for our relationship and for our assistance programs. Yeah.
On Syria, 2 days ago, the U.S. failed to get action at the highest global diplomatic forum there is, the Security Council. Have you given up on the Security Council? Do you think there's a chance that you could go back to the Security Council? And what does it do to have you evacuate the American embassy in Damascus today? What point does that make?
Well, I'll start with the second part. As you know, we've been drawing down our personnel at the embassy for some time because of security concerns, and that is why we have closed that embassy today. Ambassador Ford and all American personnel have now departed the country. That's a reflection of the situation in Syria with regards to the safety of those individuals. We will continue to work at every level to coordinate with those who believe, as we do, that action needs to be taken, that we cannot, that it is not the right course to help prop up the Assad regime, that we need to continue to put pressure on him and his cronies, if you will, and to further isolate him, limit his access to financial resources, and therefore make it harder and harder for him to maintain this crackdown. As you know, he's lost control of part of the country already. We will work with all friends of Syria, of the Syrian people rather, to mount the pressure on Assad going forward.
For that kind of political resolution of it, if President Obama's willing to wait if it takes weeks, months, a year?
Well, again, I don't want to speculate on how this will play out. I will simply say that we need to act to allow a peaceful political transition to go forward before the regime's escalating violence puts a political solution out of reach. John Christopher.
Jay, could you be specific at all about any conversations the President might have had with his allies, including Prime Minister Cameron or President Sarkozy or Chancellor Merkel?
I don't have any new conversations to read out. We are obviously coordinating with all of our international allies and partners, both at the United Nations and within the region. But I don't have any specific conversations to read out to you. Jackie?
When Prime Minister Netanyahu comes to this country to speak to AIPAC, will he also be meeting with the President, and if not, why not?
Well, I just don't have a scheduling update for you on that, but I'm sure we'll have something for you in due time. Connie?
Thank you. The President said something very important the other day. He said the U.S. is walking in lockstep with Israel. I believe that was his quote. Does that mean that the U.S. is coordinating with Israel on any strike against Iran?
I'm not going to, I don't recall the quote being quite as you described it. What I would say is the President made clear that our level of cooperation with Israel militarily and in intelligence matters has never been higher. We've made that point repeatedly because I think it demonstrates this country's commitment to Israel's security. But it does not.
Undersecretary for Public Diplomacy and Public Affairs, pending the Senate's confirmation of the President's nominee for that job, Tara Sonnenschein. Ambassador Stevens began working as are today. As you know, this is similar to the procedure that we used when Undersecretary for Political Affairs Wendy Sherman was awaiting confirmation. We brought Ambassador Shannon back from Brazil to fill the gap. This is something that we do when it's a big job where we need somebody to do the work in the interim. It had been done previously by Ann Stock, who is also Assistant Secretary for Educational and Cultural Affairs, but that's a big job too, so we decided we needed to bring in reinforcements for the interim period. But the full expectation is that the Senate will act promptly on Tara Sonnenshine's nomination. Let's go to what's on your minds. I can't imagine what that could be.
On the Embassy Damascus, we all saw your notice this morning. I'm just wondering if you can tell us what that means for the state of communication between the U.S. government and the Assad regime, given that Ambassador Ford is now no longer in Damascus, presumably no longer able to at least directly confer with either regime officials or opposition. Does that mean that we're cutting a line of communication? How are you going to keep those open?
Well, first, as we notified this morning, we have concluded that we need to suspend operations at our embassy in Damascus in light of the fact that we have security concerns about the safety of our personnel. As you know, we had been working for many weeks with Syrian officials to try to control access around our embassy facility. We were not able to come to appropriate arrangements there, so the decision was made to suspend operations. Ambassador Ford and the remaining personnel departed the country Damascus time this morning, and the flag's been taken down. We have asked our ally Poland, and Poland has agreed to be our protecting power in Damascus, so big thanks to Warsaw for that. So any remaining American citizens in Syria who haven't heeded our repeated travel warnings, which were updated again today, can receive consular services through the Embassy of Poland.
Okay, but the question was, how are you going to maintain
yes.
lines of communication
Yes.
with the Assad regime, given that you don't have anybody on the ground?
So after a brief little break in Europe, where he's going to meet up with his wife, who he hasn't seen for a while, Ambassador Ford will be coming home. He will set up shop here as head of our Syria team. The expectation, as our announcement said earlier today, was that Ambassador Ford will continue to maintain the contacts that he has broadly across Syrian society, but particularly with Syrian opposition, as will the Secretary's Special Advisor Fred Hoff, who works with Syrians outside of the country, so that we can maintain contacts, so that we can make sure that the Syrian people know that we stand with them in their desire for a democratic future.
Well, the
And when you
staffers who
have
have
to
also been evacuated, will they also be working out of this makeshift office here at State in the interim?
A number of them will be reassigned. We have a pretty big staff already here in the department, but we will have those that we need to maintain the business will be working here. Yeah.
You didn't mention anything about when contacts need to be made with the Syrian authorities, whether an American is detained or any other reason. How will that go solely now through the protecting power, or will those contacts be maintained from here as well?
Well, the Syrian embassy in Washington remains open at the level of the chargé as necessary, particularly having to do with security issues. As you know, in the past we have done business with the chargé. We can also, the Polish protecting power obviously will do the business in the way that the Swiss do for us in Iran, etc.
Have you received assurances from the Syrian government that your property will be protected in your absence, or do you expect it to be ransacked in the next 72 hours or something like that?
Well, before departing the country today, Ambassador Ford did go in and see Foreign Minister Mwalem to formalize our decision to suspend, inform him, and also to make clear that we expect that the remaining Vienna Convention obligations that they have to our property, etc., will be respected, and to formally make clear that the government of Poland will be our protecting power. So our expectation is that our property will be protected, and the hope is, as I said, this is a suspension, and when there are better days in Damascus, we'll be able to reopen.
This is their first conversation in quite some time, I imagine.
I'm not sure the answer to that. I know that when this issue of requiring a hard